Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 207. I'm Enigmaeus, and today we're looking at the interior of the smaller ring in the saucer section of the USS Discovery NCC-1031 hybrid. Getting ready to kind of start the ball rolling on this process of offering at least an example of an interior. I'm not going to be able to finish the entire interior of the ship because it's just too damn large, to be completely honest with you. But I can present something with the blueprint that might hopefully give people some ideas, some basis upon which to finish things themselves if they want to, if that's something that they want to do. I have a feeling that a lot of the blueprints that people get are kind of like spawned into the world, or maybe even occasionally built legitimately and messed around with for like half an hour, and then they're never seen again, which is fine. That's perfectly viable thing for people to do, is just kind of experiment and mess around and have some fun until they're ready to move on to the next thing. But in this case, given the size of the ship, I think this may encourage people to make a larger investment, make the ship their own, even more so than any of my other designs, specifically because there's so much room to do it. And even though we've got sort of a well-defined outer profile for the ship, it's very recognizable as a ship from the Star Trek universe. There's still a lot that people can do to mess around with things and kind of arrive at something that was originally mine and has now been modified to the extent that they can only really say that it's theirs, which is fantastic. That's probably one of the most enthusiastic outcomes I could imagine for something like this. So specifically to what we're doing now, I wanted to do the floor plan in a way that minimized the amount of blocks I would have to remove throughout the process of doing the whole thing. So at the very beginning of the video, you saw just a normal speed look around at the interior of the ship and some of the things that I had done since the last episode. One of the things that I did is I textured everything that was there, and then I put blocks around the walls, the inner ring and the outer walls, to mark where the floors would be, where the different decks would be. So what we're looking at is essentially 4 decks in this particular section of the ship. And once that's decided, then we kind of have to come up with the floor plan, speaking in terms of where are all the walls on these floors, where are the hallways that people are going to walk around to get to the different rooms that might be available to them. And that's what we're doing here, is first and foremost working with circles at this point, or doing my best to work with circles. There's something that was a little bit off about this, and it's far too late in the build process for me to figure out just exactly what it is. I had specifically built the saucer section so that there would be an odd number in the diameter. It would be like 45 or 47 or whatever it happened to be. It wouldn't be an even number because at the time the mirror tool didn't allow us to really work very well with even numbered setups. But in this case, trying to find a circle of an even numbered diameter, or sorry, an odd numbered diameter that would fit around this central column, so to speak, it was a little bit trickier than I really expected it to be. But eventually we would get a handle on it, and that would be sort of the starting point for this whole layout. And what we're really doing with these circles is we're defining the size of the rooms in terms of their distance from the center of the ring to the outside. And they're only going to occupy a portion of that. So what we're ultimately doing is sort of dividing things up so that they're uniform. And when we start putting things in, when we start evolving the floor plan, everything should kind of make sense when you come across it and you look at it. And in order to do that, I've decided that the last thing I'm going to put in place are the actual floors themselves. So I've marked off where the floors will be on the inner and outer walls, just so that I have this basically permanent reference of where the individual decks are going to be broken down, and then I'm just going to leave it like that until we get all of the walls in place, so that we don't have to go around through the floor trying to figure out what we were going to put for the walls above the one that we're on now, and all the other confusing things that can happen when you build obstacles into something like this that make it hard to see without having to maneuver around to get a better look through a floor or a wall or something like that. So we're leaving the floors to the very end. We know exactly where they'll be, but they won't be in the way is sort of the key thing here. And now you can see very arbitrarily placing a 22.5 degree spoke. We've got lines at 90 degrees, 45 degrees, and now 22.5 degrees. And these, in conjunction with the circles that we're going to be making, are basically the walls for the rooms and the hallways that we're going to be working with. Where they intersect is sort of where we'll have the major transitions between one room and another, or one room and a hallway, or whatever it happens to be. And the way that I'm doing this is I'm basically using these cubes as counting objects, milestone markers, if you will, so that I can sort of see where everything is, and I don't have to count 10 times just to remind myself where everything is supposed to go in the area that I'm working in. But once we get everything sort of placed, the actual math for figuring out exactly where to put this 22.5 degree slope wasn't something that I was prepared to sit down and do, because we're working with things on basically in a circle. We're ascribing radius lines on a circle, and we're doing it in a way that's basically very, very easy when we're dealing with the 90 degrees and the 45 degrees. And then we get to the 22.5, and it's suddenly not so easy, but it seemed to work out in this case. The 22.5 degree lines that I put in place end up looking pretty satisfactory in terms of the placement. I didn't have any complaints when I looked at it. There wasn't anything about it that looked off. So I was like, okay, good math, bad math, no math, that's done. We're in good shape. So now this is another circle, and that space between the two circles now is going to be one of the main hallways that's going to circle around this deck, or any of the 4 decks in this particular section of the ship. And branching off from that, at 90 degree angles that we've also marked already, will be more halls, so that you can go farther or closer to the central section and get to the other halls that will allow you to get to the other rooms that are on this deck. I've explained that very, very poorly, but I'm hoping that it's already making a certain amount of sense to you exactly what it is we're doing and why, and what we hope to accomplish from it. This actually took a little bit under an hour to do all of this, doing the lines and the circles, and then you'll see once we get the this circle and the last circle that we're going to do for the layout in place, we go around and we'll kind of refine everything and get it actually block by block how it's going to be when everything is all said and done. And that will be the reference that we just basically extrude and get everything sort of coming together that way. One of the things that I noticed, and it was just bizarre, when I went around and stuck lights to the ceiling of this part of the ship, it was because it was very dark inside. After I redid the texture, it's all the dark gray, so that it would contrast with the light gray on the blocks that are around the walls to mark the floors. It was very dark inside. So I went around and I started plastering lights just everywhere, and it seems now whenever I get close to a light and I start wondering, am I going to have to take that light out to get it out, to get past this area with everything placed where it needs to be? Quite often the answer is yes. It was actually disturbing how many times the answer was yes. It's not that big of a deal, but it was just, I kept thinking to myself, like, we aren't going to keep hitting these lights. There's no way that we're going to keep hitting these things. The odds of hitting them with the frequency that we did seemed a little bit outrageous in the grand scheme of things, but it turned out the way that it turned out. Another thing speaking in terms of design ideas and design goals that I had, is the circle was a good initial guide for where things would go, just by putting things in place. I've worked with circles in the voxel world for so long now that it feels very normal to have a circle in something that only normally accepts cubes. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best shape under the circumstances, especially when, in order to present the illusion of that circle, it's very bumpy. And when it comes to walking through a hallway, when the hallway itself is constantly bumping out, you know, if we were to just kind of leave things in the smoothed circle mode that we try and usually do in other designs, it's just, I find it actually kind of fatiguing. Like, it's tiresome to have this constant barrage of changes going on in the hallway instead of nice smooth walls. So having put the circles in place, now we go through, and as you can see, we're deliberately converting them to straight hallways, as straight as we can get them. 22.5 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees, as close to a uniform width as possible. It's actually really difficult. The 45 degrees and the 22.5 degrees don't get along necessarily all that well when it comes to putting these kinds of things into place. There's always this appearance when you look at them of a transition between gaps, I guess you could say. But it's still straight walls that we're working with, and it's still following the general profile of that circle. So we are getting that sense of something that's round and going around that central pillar in a uniform way, but the end result is going to be something with smooth, straight walls that are a little bit more fitting of the hallways in a starship, I think. So the next episode, we're going to pick up exactly where we left off here, and the goal would be to have basically the main structure of the interior, all the walls, all the floors, done and in place, and let you see exactly how that happened before we move on and start adding doors and windows and all that other stuff. So if you want to be notified about that and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.